on a horse. An Indian had grabbed the reins. He took his knife out, cut the reins, and ran off to safety. The third guy was injured, but in the melee he got underneath a pine bush, and they never found him. And the third was a drummer boy, 10 years old for the British, who was so frightened that he jumped over the Devil's Hole Gorge. Now that's about a 120-foot drop to the water. Rather than be scalped and face the Indians, he jumped. The strap of his drum caught in a tree branch, broke his fall, and he survived the day. Anyway, long story short, the British decided in 1768 to take retribution on the Senecas, and they took title to land 4 miles wide, 2 miles on both sides of the Niagara River, 2 miles in what is now Canada, 2 miles in the United States. That became British ownership at that point in time because the Seneca signed off on that and all the islands in the river. As a result of the American Revolution, New York State took over the ownership of that strip of land, but they, for some reason, I'm still not sure why, they cut it down from 2 miles to 1 mile. So there's a strip of land along the Niagara River from Youngstown, New York to Buffalo that is 1 mile wide that the state of New York owned, free and clear, and that land was also not included in the Holland Land Survey. So if you live in the village of Lewiston like I do, and you look at your title report begins with a conveyance out of the people of the state of New York, because they owned it all, including all the lots in the village of Lewiston and Youngstown. If you're on the other side of the Mile Reserve, your deeds began with a deed from a fellow by the name of William Wilnick, representing the Holland Land Company. So in terms of checking your chain of title, it's interesting to know where that line is. So that strip of land had to be surveyed in 1798. Seth Pease did that. He located the whole river, calculated a line a mile back, and he laid it out. This is a copy of his field notes. There is a Lake Erie. He started to follow these down. I'm not going to get into a lot of that, but that's the way the surveys look. I wanted to show you this. This is a hand copy page in the back of all of their field manuals that is mathematical formulas handy for calculating distances and areas. They hand wrote this into the back of every field book. This is a modern day surveyor's field book. The same thing is printed in the back of every one. So in 1790, we took some lessons from that.
How accurate were they?
How accurate?
Yeah, did they end up being?
I'm gonna get into that a little bit on down, because I'm able to compare what they did in 1790s with what we did in 1997. I'll show you a little bit about that. This was a very serious undertaking. So in December of 1797, Ellicott ordered meat for the crews. The pork shall be of merchantable quality, well put up and salted in good, clean, tight, substantial barrels, containing 200 neat weight each. There shall not be in each barrel more than 3 shoulders without legs and 2 heads without ears or snouts. That's a specification.
That's awesome.
However, when you're in the wilderness and you open up the barrel and it doesn't meet the specification,
Who cares?
you're out of luck. The budget for food was $5,160. The camp supplies was budgeted for $7,336, including $250 for wine, spirit, and medicine, which probably was more wines than spirit. The survey required 150 men, most of which had axes in their hands. I'll explain that in a minute. They included 2 transit engineers, 10 deputy surveyors, axemen, boatmen, store managers, cooks, messengers, and others. Joseph himself was paid $8 a day. He had total charge and responsibility for the survey, and the Eastern Transit Meridian was started on June 14th of 1798, and his brother Benjamin took an oath of office in front of the magistrate to perform his duty truly and faithfully, which was back then the standard that I think probably ought to be the standard today. Here's the map. I got a copy of the map here, but this is a map. This is the Eastern Transit Meridian. By the Eastern Transit Meridian, I mean they went along the Pennsylvania line, And along that line, where their Holland Land Survey property was supposed to begin, they set a stone monument. They occupied that monument, they sighted the North Star, and they went north to Lake Ontario. The Western Transit Meridian oh, yeah, what happened here? You can hardly see it, but the idea was they were supposed to come up here like this and go right straight up, but there's a hitch and you get along right here for about 2 miles. Remember I told you that Robert Morris kept one of the deed parcels to himself. Well, when he was conveying out land, he had a bad description, but the deed had been given to a new person. So when they got to this point, because this land had been legally transferred, they had to make an adjustment of about 2 miles, which kind of came out of the Holland Land Survey map. That still goes today. If you subdivide a piece of land, and you sell the land to your neighbor, and that's the first deed on record, and then you sell another, and it happens to overlap because you don't do it properly, the second purchaser loses out. First in time wins all the time. So anyway, that's what happened here. So it went a little bit of a hitch to the west. This is the Western Transit Meridian. Now the Eastern Transit Meridian defines the eastern limit of the survey. The Western Transit Meridian is just a working line to help them keep their quality control when they're doing east-west lines for the distances between them. We know the distance between the 2 points. Monument's set on the Pennsylvania line. Anytime you measure along these lot lines between that, you should get the same distance. You don't always, but that's the way that they were working this out. Here's a copy of the Meridian notes. This is the Pennsylvania line, and this is his survey as he comes out, and you'll see he's showing the slope of the land. He's talking about bearings and distances. He talks about the nature of the timber and what the soil looks like. Every 80 chains, which is what? A mile, they set a stone monument on these lines when they're laying this out. So they put actual stones in the ground. Here is a copy of their field notes. This was July of 1799. This is the stone that they set at the south end on the Pennsylvania line of the Western Transit Meridian. And that's the one I know most about because it's closest to home. And you see, it shows exactly, they had stonemasons with them. They'd find a big piece of stone, they'd chisel in the information, and they'd set the stone the way they'd go. And here it says that on the south side it says Pennsylvania, latitude 47 degrees, 42 degrees maybe. On the west side, it says W and J Willink, southeast corner. On the east side, the #1 southwest corner. And then at the top, it talks about, if I can read this, Meridian. Oh, I can't read it. It's a little bit cranky. I can get it to you later though. So anyway, the Western Transit Meridian starting stone was set July 1st. As 1999 approached, several members of the Nice Apples, as the Niagara Frontier region, which I was a member of, took notice in what we call an after-meeting conference, generally held at a wooden platform about this high. You know how that goes? And after you've had a couple of soda pops, we decided that since we're coming up to the bicentennial, we ought to do something to celebrate that. So we began by going into all of our private records and getting all the information for people who had found original stones, and we started a database of those. The original stone at the end of the Western Transit Meridian, which is at the Pennsylvania line, was unknown. New York State Engineers Boundary Commission report in 1897 indicated the original stone was not found then, so we knew it was gone for at least 100 years. No one had seen the stone. In May 29th of 1993, it was found. And Steve Bodecker and Steve Malley, both licensed land surveyors and both working for my company at the time, went with Steve's 2 boys and, Steve, I can't do that. Mr. Bodecker's 2 boys and Mr. Malley's 2 girls. This is in Allegheny State Park, where that was, and they went looking, and they found it. and that is the original stone. It's got the same, there's the listing that was in the field notes, and there's exactly what it says. That's a 6-foot rule. You get an idea for how big it is. It was quite an exciting time. So the problem is that it was 80 feet north of the Pennsylvania line, and it was laying down like that. So it was very, very suspicious. We came to the conclusion that someone came upon that stone and said, that would look great in my fireplace. Got it about 80 feet, decided it wasn't worth the burning, and left it. That's what we figured happened. This is and I brought one with me here. This is a poster that we had made that talks about the story of the finding, how they actually came about finding it. Those are the 2 guys that found it. We did a global positioning survey of the monuments that we had recovered, and this is where, if this was if you were all licensed land surveyors, we'd start to get really bored real quick. So I'm not going to do that to you, but we did recover a lot of stones, and I'll give you a very quick overview of this. On the eastern transit meridian, that's the one in the far east, we found stones at 1 mile, 22 miles, 24 miles, 29 miles, and 30 miles. That's north of the Pennsylvania line. On the western transit meridian, we found the beginning stone disturbed, and mile 6, miles 45, and mile 48. Now, we did look for others, but we didn't find them, because if you've ever been up Transit Road in Niagara County, it's built, the center line is built in the western transit meridian. So those monuments are gone for a long time. That's a long straight road. So on April 20th, 96, a group of surveyors went out and we used the global positioning system, and we located all of the monuments that we had found. I have a tabulation here that we can talk about afterwards. I'm not going to get into the details, but just by quick summary, and this gets into the precision, okay? This is for the western transit meridian, measured from the origin. Now the origin, let me explain what happened. We worked with the State Office of Parks and Historic Preservation and convinced them that the monument where we found it was not where it was originally intended to be. We got permission to remove it from the field. So when we celebrated the bicentennial, we took that monument and we put in a 8-foot long, 1-inch rebar with a brass disc on it where we found it. And we did the same thing on the state line where it was supposed to be. So when I talk about original stones here, measured from the origin, it's where we deemed it should have been on the Pennsylvania line all along. So to the 6 mile stone, we had 6 miles plus 139.17 feet. So there's an extra 139 feet in there. The azimuth to that stone indicates that the stone was actually 12.5 feet west of the meridian. So this gives you an idea for, there's a difference between accuracy and precision. Precision essentially is the care you take in making a measurement. Now these guys took a lot of care for the era, but the equipment they had was very limited in capability. So although they were very precise in their efforts, their accuracy was less than we would have hoped it to be. At the 45 mile stone, we found an extra 552 feet, and that stone was 38 feet west of the meridian. And 48 mile stone, an extra 526 feet, and that was 34.5 feet west of the meridian. I'll tell you how this happened. When they occupied the stone on the Pennsylvania line, they cut a swath 88 feet north, 66 feet wide, clear cut, with axes. Now, if you've ever cut a tree down with an axe and then had to climb over it, you can imagine how difficult that would be, because and a lot of it's pine. So you've got to clean it all out, you got to get the line of sight open. It was a lot of work. So that also factors into the precision, I'm sure. This is the eastern transit meridian. We got slightly different results. So the 1 mile stone, just 4 feet short, not bad in the mile. and it's 3.22 feet west of the meridian. At 22 miles, it's dead on. The 22 mile stone is exactly north of the origin stone on the eastern transit meridian, and it was 86.38 feet short of the proposed distance. And so on the numbers go. So I'm not going to get into all that draw, but it gives you an idea for the precision that we found. Now, every land surveyor worth his salt will tell you this. We very seldom set new boundaries. Our job is to retrace the intent of the original surveyor. So even though we can mathematically demonstrate that these monuments that are there are not where they were intended to be, those monuments mark the line. That's important to recognize. Now, just a quick thing. We looked at this thing in the Western Transit Meridian. They accumulated a foot of error about every 480 feet. That's 1 part in 2,500. That's a lot. On the other side, it was much closer. I'm sorry, go back. Western Transit Meridian, they had 1 foot of error every 480. Eastern Transit Meridian, 1 foot of error every half mile, 2,500 feet. It was much better done. One of the reasons appears to be that the Eastern Transit Meridian was performed under this direct supervision of Benjamin, with assistance from Augustus Porter, who was a very experienced land surveyor. This was the boundary of the whole survey, so it was extremely important. It was a limitation line. And his notes state, formed by astronomical observations that began the 11th day of July with all possible care and exactitude, planting monuments of stone at the end of every chains, and it was the boundary. So we had highly competent surveyors, took an oath of office with the magistrate, and they took their time and did a better job than Ebenezer Carey. Ebenezer Carey was a surveyor from Connecticut. His job was to do the Western Transit Meridian, and in his notes it says, well, here we go again. They were already feeling tired. The mosquitoes had lights on them. They were huge. They were going to be living in the wilderness. His crew was a little depressed. Plus, it was really nothing more than a check line, right? It was in the middle of the survey. It wasn't at that point a boundary. So we feel that they were just, they were concerned about, oh, they were attacked by Indians too. Just to throw that in, make it exciting. This is a picture of the existing monument at the Pennsylvania line on the Eastern Transit Meridian. The survey, the Holland Land Survey, completed in October 1800, total cost $70,921.69 Precision. 178 6-mile square townships were fully laid out, and the details of the surface of the land, soils, lumber, creeks, rivers, mill seats, everything firmly established in the area. When they had these notes, they could talk to potential buyers about what they would get and where they would get it. That was very important to them. In 1801, he opened up the office, the land office for the Holland Land Company in Batavia. That building's still there. In fact, I've done this presentation in that building. And they opened up sales, and at that point, when the survey was done, the Holland Land Company hired Joseph to be their sales agent, because no one knew the land better than he did. By 1821, he resigned his position. In his closing years, he experienced dire mental health issues and ended up in the insane asylum and broke. It was a very sad story to what was a brilliant surveying career. So here's just some quick images in our preparation for the survey. These are, I mentioned George Miller earlier. He's the one who wrote the article. This is Jim Delaplante. They're both surveyors from Niagara Frontier. This is in the New York State Archives at the State Library in Albany, and they're actually looking at the original Holland Land Survey material. This is a group. We had a family day down there on the day that we took the monument out and marked it. By the way we got it out is we took in a heavy-duty tarp. We put the monument on it and rolled up the edges, and 8 men carried it about 400 yards to an ATV to get it out. If you ever go to Allegheny State Park, there is a museum in the Quaker side, and this monument is on display in that museum today. So you can go see it there. But this is a group of people who were out there for the day. This is in front of the administration building at Red House, and we had modern day surveying instruments, we had old surveying instruments, and we had a lot of historians who attended this thing, and we were teaching them about techniques and methods for doing the work. Here is an old style GPS receiver. That's on the location where they actually found the monument. That is Steve Bodecker. He's one of the guys that found it. And this is the guy standing around after the GPS observations were made. There's a lot of post-processing needs to be done to find out what the actual distances are. And those are the two Steves, Bodecker and Malley, they're the guys that found it. Now you get a good feel for how big that monument is. And that's the Eastern Transit Meridian. That's the committee, and the idiot with the tie on is me. And that's it. So that's pretty much the story of the history of the settlement of the Western New York Wilderness, an organization of it, and I'd be delighted to answer any questions you might have. Yes, sir.
The Eastern Transit Meridian, is that the one in Transit Road in Orleans County?
I don't know of a transit road in Orleans County. Transit road is in Niagara County, and that's the Western Transit Meridian.
All right. There's one between Albion and Batavia, or between Albion and Holly, there's a transit road.
I didn't know that.
North and south.
I'm kind of a far Western New York guy. I didn't do much work over that way, so it probably is. If it's called Transit Road, it probably is.
There's a marker right at a big stone right at the corner of Transit and Ridge Road. And I was in the Holland Land Company there in Batavia, and they said they didn't think they had a picture of that when I took a picture of it and gave it to them. It's got the Daughters of the American Revolution plaque on it.
So this is Transit Road in Orleans County.
Yeah.
Never seen it? Good catch, thank you. Didn't know that. Yes?
Were these stones generally maintained, or did they just end up lost in wherever?
Well, England had it right. In the spring of the year, they would take the young children out to the boundaries of the property and they'd beat them with a switch. So they would remember where they were and they'd never mess with them. We didn't do that here. So no, generally speaking, they were not maintained. Most people would find them, and if you don't look very carefully, I mean, some of these hadn't been seen with a human eye for decades. So they might be moss covered, you might not see the numbers. There would be a lot of numbers chiseled on them, but that's starting to wear away after 200 years. So most people would see it and not know what it was. Yes, sir.
You mentioned you never changed lines, you just measured them. I'm in real estate, and I've seen a couple of instances in lines where, wrong, or things were built behind the line, and lines were even moved another 6 feet, whatever it was, in place. So you could never just actually move the lines to where it's supposed to be.
Well, I think you're essentially talking about modern day surveying issues. A whole lot of surveying has happened in the last 200 years. I know situations where you do a modern day subdivision where you put a new roadway in and some building contractor is hired to build a new house and he wants to save a few bucks, so he lays it out and builds it, and when the surveyor comes in to mark it for a mortgage survey, they find out that it's either in the setback line or it's over the line. At that point, you have a choice, Mr. Contractor. You can tear down everything and start over again, or you can buy property from the lot over. But in a subdivision, if they're trying to maximize return, the lots are pretty much close to the minimum the town will accept. So he probably has to buy the whole lot and live with the problem. So there are errors that happen. Surveyors make errors. I made errors. My son's still finding them. He still has my company today. We have very interesting discussions. He's got this strange grin on his face when it comes to it, too, so I don't know what that's all. Yes, sir.
I think you made a little reference to Native Americans that were in the wilderness when the surveyors were there. Are there any stories where the surveyors had interruption? I mean, these guys, the Native Americans, saw people coming in surveying, and what about wild animals too? There was nothing here.
There were definitely instances where they had fights with Native Americans. There were surveyors that were killed. There were wolves, there were bears, there were rattlesnakes. It was genuine wilderness. The biggest problem was mosquitoes and malaria type issues. A lot of people died from illnesses from the smallest animal that was out there. It's like, you know, they couldn't get away from it. They didn't even have a doctor in 150 people. They didn't have a doctor. So if you got ill, whatever the smartest guy was in the group was taking care of you until they buried you, unfortunately. But yes, there are indications in some of the notes that they did actually have pitched battles. And there's a couple of indications of living through tornadoes. And that was quite hectic.
Like my group.
Ken, did I understand you correctly to say they clear cut a 60-foot wide path?
66 feet, 88 miles long, on both lines.
How many people did it take? How long to cut?
Well over 100 of the 150 were axemen. It took a while.
Like years we're talking?
No, not what, you know, they did it all in a year and a half, I think. But they would cut
They were used to.
almost nonstop. I was running a transmission line for a power authority one time from Utica to Oswego in the winter with 5 feet of snow on the ground. And they gave me 3 French Canadian brothers who were lumberjacks to cut my line. And we would get to an angle point, we'd turn out the angle, we'd put stake in the ground, and they'd turn on their chainsaws, and they could follow that line so accurately, it was just amazing. Now, we were just cutting 5 or 6 feet wide so we could see. And these guys didn't have chainsaws, but they were rough and tumble men, and they knew how to get a job done, and they just did it. I don't think there was any such thing as a blister. Yes, sir.
Is Ellicott Street in Batavia named after the Ellicotts from the Holland Land Company?
Ellicott Street, Batavia, and Buffalo. There's more Ellicott Streets in Western New York than you shake a stick at.
Ellicottville.
Ellicottville. Yep.
What
Yes.
about Preemption Road in Wayne County? Is that the same as the Preemption Road? Is that?
It might be, I don't know.
It runs north-south.
North-south?
104 goes south.
It could very well be. I don't know if that line was ever monumented. It's outside my knowledge. Yes, sir. I'll be right to you.
That's what I was going to ask, the preemption line, because it goes right through Ontario County, like right through Oaks Corners.
Most likely is.
And
Most likely is.
I think it goes right down Seneca Lake.
Yes, it does.
So it's the same road.
Yeah.
Right by-
Yes.
The stones that you found, were they all left? Did you leave them all where?
Oh, yes.
you found them? Okay.
All except that one that we had determined had been moved substantially. We would not take out an existing mine, but
Does anybody?
we'd never be able to drink beer again.
Does anybody geocache any of those sites?
Geocache
Any of
them?
those sites?
No, but I can get you state plane coordinates if you want to try.
I was just curious.
Yes, ma'am.
I was looking at the maps, and you can very faintly see the outline of the triangle tract,
Yes.
which of course was Morris, Bayard, and Clarkson.
This one here?
Yes,
Yes.
which is started at Leroy and ended up to the lake.
It's called the Leroy, Bayard, and McEvers Tract.
Yeah,
Yep.
well, Clarkson was in there too. I mean, it changed hands a few times.
Yeah.
Morris,
Just on this map, that's what it's labeled. And this line is called Morris's Purchase, so that's the land that Morris kept to himself before he sold to the Dutch.
Oh,
Anyone else?
Okay.
Thank you very much. You've been a great audience. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Ken. Now, before you leave us, we have a 50-50 drawing, and if you do the honors.
17 and 30.
There you go, you pick a good one.
It's a red ticket.
Red ticket, okay, last 3 digits.
4, 3, 2.
432, that's easy to remember.
432. Last 3 digits. It's not, it's really great. You got it?
I think so.
Oh,
All right,
great, thanks.
Okay.
Okay, see Nancy for the, thank you, Chet Edsel. All right, we're gonna stick around a few minutes? You got one
Absolutely. I'll be glad to stay
All
for
right,
long.
great,
Absolutely.
great. Okay, we have some refreshments in the back. Please stay and visit. Thanks for coming.
My great-great-grandfather bought